Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Regeneration Advent Calendar. Today, we're taking a look at a highly anticipated release for day 9. It is the Caves of Androzani, or the Blowholes of Androzani, because they're never referred to as caves.
I mean, the Doctor even points it out himself, doesn't he? That they're technically blowholes right at the
Yeah,
start of the story. He's like instantly picking holes in his own plot.
damn.
I wonder how many holes or caves or blowholes we'll end up picking in this plot as we move forwards.
Very smooth, very
Yeah, there
smooth.
we go. I mean, probably not too many because this was voted number one Doctor Who story in, was it 2009? I want to say.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, it was
2009.
when they did 200 episodes, wasn't it, for the
Planet of the Dead. Yeah, it
yeah,
was.
that's it, in the poll in DWM. And I mean, based off of that, I think we can be contrarian sometime, but we're not going to be too contrarian this time. Our feelings towards it are generally pretty positive, I think it is fair to say. So don't go in expecting us to rip this one a new blowhole. We are
Oh,
we're pretty fair on it.
well,
We really
hopefully.
do. Yeah, we have a very good time with this story. But Peter, dear old Peter, he's leaving us so soon. We only just met him yesterday in Castrovalva. Now here we are, day 9, saying goodbye to him. What do you think of the Fifth Doctor now? Because we didn't really talk much about him yesterday because Castrovalva is not quite fully formed yet, is he? And he takes a while to get there. So it felt
Yeah,
right to save it for Caves at the end of his era and look back.
I think Peter's one of those doctors that gets dismissed pretty quickly
Hmm.
by a lot of people. And I think a lot of people probably say he's the weakest of like the classic doctors. And I've always enjoyed Davison, and I think having him on, listening to his Big Finish stuff, and hopefully the time you're listening to this, we've done a Fifth Doctor retrospect on Big Finish, so check that out. I really like him. I think that this story in particular really plays to the Fifth Doctor's strengths, really. And I think
Hmm.
that in this story, you get a glimpse of how the Fifth Doctor could have been handled better.
Yeah, I think what works so well about it is you taking a doctor who is a lot more human and friendly and sticking him in a situation which is very much the opposite of who he is. It's not quite the type of story you'd expect to find him in, but
Yeah,
that's why it works so well because it pushes this doctor in particular and the character of the doctor in general really to a limit because the Doctor's someone who always looks for the best in people, who's always out to redeem them. There's not much redemption to be found in this story. It is just about him and Perry making it out alive and by the skin of their teeth at that.
yeah. And I think that's like, even like the best Big Finish stories of Davison's in like Spare Parts. There's always that sort of grim impending doom in those stories where like that's the best stories you're gonna get, putting this human doctor in the darkest situation and seeing him kick and scream trying to get out of it. Really,
Yeah, it's very much about that sharp contrast, isn't it? That really does highlight the light and good nature of the Doctor and how dark humanity in this particular story can be at times.
yeah, it really plays with like humanity's greed. Really,
Certainly. Yeah,
uh,
so certainly some criticisms of capitalism in there, I suppose, with Morgus, the head of this company, who is closing these production plants up in the north, and so putting people out of work. Meanwhile, he's also opening up labour camps in the south, where people who are out of work get sent to work for free. So, yeah, certainly some deep cuts in this one.
Doctor Who's never been political.
No, 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 never, never.
No.
So yeah, war profiteering, all that good stuff in here, but not political at all.
Mm.
Even assassination, again, not political.
Yeah, and very different Davison in this story completely
Yeah.
with his wit.
Mm. yeah, it's great seeing his doctor pushed to the brink in this one. And I think that really comes to a head in the part three cliffhanger, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you get the desperation of trying to save Perry, and this is why I'm not a big fan of Eminem, Eramim, whatever you want to say, because it lessens the whole impact of the Fifth Doctor going to save her. But they've only just met. Yeah, there's more power if you just believe that this is their first proper outing as a crew.
Mm. Well, certainly at least one of their first.
Hmm.
So I think the only real thing that gives it away is coming quite soon after is that she's in the same outfit as
Yeah.
Planet Fire, isn't it? But yeah, certainly there is something impactful about the idea that he's saving someone he's not long met. But yeah, he says he owes it to her by trying because he's the one who got her into this mess.
And I just really like when a doctor gets battered and they look distressed, like Capaldi and Twice Upon. I just like it when they look a bit tatty. They've been through it, and you just like, yeah, you can tell they're on their way out now.
Hmm. It's a way of being ominous without flashing a red light over the character saying they're going to die soon. Like it's not a thing that's destined to happen like you sometimes get in New Who, particularly with the 10th Doctor, for example. And I mean, it's now happening with the 13th Doctor, or has happened with the 13th Doctor, actually, because we will have had that regeneration story by the time this comes out. We're not quite there yet. We still don't have the title as of the time of us recording this, but
Which is late
yeah,
August, if you're
yeah,
curious.
yeah, they've done that prophecy thing, haven't they? With the
Yeah,
13th
with
Doctor.
time.
Yeah, and so, but there's something that for me works better about this, where you can tell it's going to happen by the tone of the story, by how much the Doctor's going through, but it's not. He's not trying to avoid his death. In fact, if anything, he's sort of accepting of the fact because he knows he needs to save Perry throughout it.
Yeah, because you do get a sort of that foreboding in a way in part three when you get that glimpse of that regeneration, which I think we've
Mm.
all assumed is regeneration. Um,
Yeah.
which would have been a bold move if like Colin Baker just crashed out of that ship. He probably wouldn't have saved Perry. Blow right straight to the TARDIS.
I think what also works about it is everyone else in this story is very selfish.
Yes.
Like everyone's out for their own reasons, and so that's ultimately a lot of the other characters' comeuppances. Really, the fact that they're doing it for their own military pride or their own profit or their own revenge, all these selfish reasons going on. It's only the Doctor and Perry who are looking out for each other, and I think that's what works better about. Had this just been the Doctor on his own, having to get the Bat's milk to save himself, it wouldn't quite work because he's not being selfless there. Whereas because he is here trying to save Perry, and again, it's made more selfless by the fact that it's someone he doesn't know quite as well. And so that just adds an extra layer to this story, really.
It sort of goes back to like Russell's original idea of how the 10th Doctor would regenerate, just saving this alien family. It feels
Mm.
very inspired by Caves' sort of idea of, again, Tennant often referred to, I guess Time Crash did that really, more humanizing his Doctor.
Yeah, they're similar, aren't they?
Yeah,
The fifth and 10th Doctor. I
especially
mean, they're
get
part
that
of
in
the
part
family
four.
now, so
Yeah, I mean, part four, you definitely get that 10th Doctor energy when you get Davison running along the old Androzani plains.
very much so. But yeah, for me, going back to how we feel about the Fifth Doctor, I really do enjoy Peter's interpretation of the Doctor, and I think Big Finish has allowed him to spread his wings a lot more. And if anything, he sounds more like the Doctor now with the more older, gravelly voice.
Mm.
But I think it adds a bit more gravitas to his Doctor in
He's
many
not very
ways.
breathy. He's not like, yes, soon be there. Yes.
Mm. You sound a bit like the first Doctor there.
Well,
But
that's
yeah,
Davison. Now he looks like the first Doctor. Now Davison.
there you go.
Yeah. So all
Yeah, I
links.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah. But no, I think so. Maybe he stands out a bit less against the other Doctors because he is often less assertive. He
He's a
is more
bit
of a
beige.
quieter. Yeah, so, I mean, very much so in the costume. But yeah, I can see why he slips through the cracks. He's not quite as eccentric as, say, the Fourth Doctor. He's not as pompous as the Third Doctor or something like
Maybe he's a
that.
bit more harder
But
to define. It's a bit like a lot of
yeah,
people compare him to Jodie, but where do you pinpoint these two? What are their
yeah.
defining features?
I think because his characterization was changed quite a bit, particularly early on, like in stories like The Visitation, he's a completely different character to what he is in Kinder just before it sometimes. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so they don't quite know where to go with him yet. But I think season 21 in particular is where they really nailed it down a lot more. Stories like Frontios, where he's there with the glasses and such, that's where you get much more of the Fifth Doctor you recognise. Almost more from Time Crash. It's like it's the Doctor, the 10th Doctor's remembering and talking about, or Moffat is remembering and talking about through the 10th Doctor. That is probably the version that's lived on.
I definitely think season 21 is probably my favourite Fifth Doctor season because I think the tone, it sort of teeters on what Colin's era tried, and you can tell what direction they're going for with Colin in sort of season 21 because it's a more grittier, darker season with like the death count and like resurrection. The whole Silurian triad being wiped out. There's a lot more casualty within the Fifth Doctor's world.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way, the Colin era was a victim of previous era's success in that way, isn't it? It's like, oh, people like this, let's keep going further with it, and maybe they ended up going too far with it in a way that wasn't quite recognizable as Doctor Who violence.
But I think Caves, it sort of has that, oh, that's a bit edgy for Doctor Who, but I think that it teeters on that line brilliantly. I think Caves has
Yeah.
just got it right.
It's edgy with a purpose, isn't it? It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like it's trying to be edgy for the sake of it, which sometimes moments of violence in the Sixth Doctor era do. Like, I mean, there's not really any blood in Caves that I think
You've
of.
only really got the bit on Davison's scalp, haven't you, really?
Yeah. Whereas Colin era, you've got people getting stabbed and there is visibly blood like staining the shirt. You've got the crushing of the hands in Attack of the Cybermen. I think maybe that's where it starts to go a bit
Visceral.
yeah. Whereas it's more what you don't see. Like there's the scene towards the end where Stotts shoots down his two crewmates, but you never see them get shot at all. They're off screen while he's opening fire on them. But anyway, we're letting our love for this story sort of spill over a bit too early, aren't we? We haven't even got through the trivia yet. So, Ben, why did Peter decide to leave?
Well, this story, I guess, has inspired many doctors as it's sort of become, I wouldn't say a Doctor Who curse, but it's kind of become inevitable for most doctors where.
It's like a funny coincidence.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
it is really. Good old Patrick Troughton was at the BBC car park, saw Peter Davison, was like, look, do 3 years and move on. Well, 3 seasons. And that's exactly what Davison did. But I think Davison wanted to stay if the stories were like they were in season 21, as he wasn't very happy with the season 20 stories. And I think that probably is his weakest season in his era.
Yeah, that was at the end of that one was when he had to decide whether to sign on for a fourth year or leave on the third. And so based on the strength of that, he decided to leave. But he said since that because of the quality tick up that happened in season 21, he maybe would have stayed had that quality been there for season 20.
I mean, that's an interesting point because it makes you wonder if Davison did stay for that season, whether Doctor Who would have ended up with the hiatus at the end of it.
Yeah, that's true. Like, would they have quite stretched for the hyperviolence? Because, as well, I think a lot of it was scenes like Perry being strangled in the Twin Dilemma. It was this doctor who was quite violent, whereas I don't think Peters would have noticeably stretched that far. I think there's things that the Fifth Doctor can almost get away with that the Sixth Doctor couldn't.
Yeah.
Like, he pointed a gun at a Cyberman in Earthshock. He killed the Cyber Leader with Adric's badge. And so there's stuff like that that the Sixth Doctor often gets called out for, like the shootout at the end of Attack of the Cybermen, that maybe the Fifth Doctor gets more of a pass on.
Yes, yeah.
But maybe it is down to the attitude again, like we were saying earlier about how he goes under the radar a bit more because he's a bit more of a quieter Doctor. He's not quite as brash and
In your face.
outgoing as the Sixth Doctor is. So yeah, when you have those moments of violence, they are more in your face when it's the Sixth Doctor committing them. Yeah, perhaps that's partly why. Yeah, it's an interesting what if, isn't it?
Yeah, Big Finish. Get on that. I'll be interested.
Yeah, I suppose in other bits of trivia, this is the return of the great Robert Holmes to the show after Power of Kroll was his last one, which maybe not the best one to go out on, so it's good that he got the chance to come back.
It's a grand return, isn't it? And this is his only regeneration story. He did a post-regeneration Spearhead, but this is like him handling, the handover, really.
Yeah, that's true. He very much leaves his mark with this one. I mean, he's arguably written the best post-regeneration story and the best regeneration story, so he's got a good track record going for him, doesn't he?
It's interesting how he just gets a handle on what the Doctor is as a character, because I think for this story, like we probably said in our little Fifth Doctor discussion, how he really draws out the sardonic wit in Davison, especially when he introduces with Shara's Jack, and Shara's Jack saying, your sense of humour will be the death of you.
Yeah.
It really, you can see that there's sort of that Tom Baconness there, because I think that there is more of a clown to Davison's exterior in this one, and I like it. I think that this is probably the Fifth Doctor's best written story.
Yeah, he's much more playful with pretty much everyone around him, really. Like there's him pointing out the captain or whatever the character's right. It's General or something, isn't it? Where he's saying "Sir" all the time. I like catching Perry out on it at one point.
Yeah, it's a great bit, really.
Yeah, wonderful moments of wit there. But yeah, so it was Eric Sayward who wanted Robert Holmes back, really, because I think he said he'd been watching like old Doctor Who clips, because the script editors, they were allowed to like go into the archive, weren't they, and look at old footage. And he was saying how, he wanted to get him back. And John Nathan Turner was like, no, I'm not having this old fart back. I want him gone. He wanted like new writers in, and so Eric Saber very much had to fight John Nathan Turner on that, and he tried to get him in for the Five Doctors. Terrence Dicks ended up doing that one though, and instead Robert Holmes got to do this story instead, which I think works out a bit better. I think Terrence does the more celebratory feel better, and Robert Holmes does this hard-hitting regeneration story.
I mean, Eric Sayward did write a little bit of Caves. He wrote the explanation, because this is the story where we finally get the explanation why the Fifth Doctor in Castrovalva put some cellular on his lapel, because
definitely
of the toxic
civilization.
Gas. It's for toxic gas. And he also wrote the regeneration bit with Colin. He wrote the first bits for the Sixth Doctor.
I see.
So a bit
like how
Russell,
an incoming,
a bit like that, really. Russell and Moffat, and Moffat and Chibnall. Yeah. I guess we'll soon find out whether it's Chibnall and Russell. I'm sure. Yeah, that's still a look in the air. If you're listening. We don't.
Yeah, we're time traveling at the moment. We're cool.
We're doing Doctor Who.
But yeah, the working title was Chain Reaction, but that pretty quickly got changed to The Caves of Androzani. But during the production itself, there was some strike action going on. And so as a result, 2 of the sequences had to be cut. One right at the start was a TARDIS scene. But instead, because of what they'd filmed on location, a line didn't make sense, or a couple of lines in the first scene didn't make sense. And so they had to ADR some bits on, didn't they, with a voiceover between the Doctor and Perry. Which it's an awkward start, isn't it? Because it's very obviously
ADR
recorded over, and then very quickly cuts to the actual recording on location. But it's one of very few flukes, really. And because it's not an intentional decision, it was unfortunately result of a strike, you let it pass a bit more. Yeah. And I suppose once you're beyond that, you sort of just forget it ever happened, really, don't you? Because there's no other awkward bits like that. And then another scene which got cut would have involved the Mud Beast again, while the Doctor was on his hunt for the bat's milk in episode 4. So, given how that beast magma beast, looked in part 2 and part 1, I think that's probably a blessing in disguise that one ended up being lost. I
mean, you see it dead.
Yeah, that's true. You do, don't you? Which I think, if anything, adds to the story. Just like everything's dying around them, and like even this innocent mud beast has got caught in it. I keep calling it a mud beast, it's a magma beast.
Yeah.
So, it just adds to that atmosphere towards the end with everything dying around the Doctor and Perry. It's like the whole story has this very ominous feel, thanks in part to that.
I think this is a cool bit of trivia. You know the Fifth Doctor's regeneration effect? This isn't the first time we see it.
When else do we see it?
We see it in another season 21 story. Do you want to hazard a guess which one it is?
Planet of Fire?
No.
Oh.
We see it in the Resurrection of the Daleks when the space station explodes.
Oh, yes.
So there's a fun bit of regeneration trivia there.
No. I suppose other bit of trivia is like it's sort of building on from what we had in Legopolis, where we had the companions and the monsters appearing at the end there through archival footage, whereas here we get new footage from the companions. And so Matthew Waterhouse, Sarah Sutton, Janet Fielding, Mark Strickson, Gerald Flood, and Anthony Ainley all came in to record like a little segment, didn't they? Which was overlaid over the Fifth Doctor's dying face, and then his final word was Adric.
Still haunts him. It's interesting, but the best Fifth Doctor stories have androids in for me.
Yeah.
You've got Earthshock, Visitation, Caves. Fifth Doctor's got a thing for androids.
I mean, I suppose Chameleon is kind of an android as well.
True,
so there's
certainly
a fair few with the android. 5 Doctors as well.
Yeah,
Raston Warrior Robot. Yeah.
There we go.
It's a sci-fi trope in general, though, isn't it? To have robots about.
I feel like they become more common in the Davison era. Like you get it in like Android Invasion, obviously, but I think Davison era kind of made it commonplace for Doctor Who.
I mean, Davison era went one step beyond and actually had a proper robot rather than a man in a suit.
Yeah, that's true.
But almost to its detriment, really. But yeah. And so, but yeah, for those sequences, Janet Fielding, Mark Strickson, and Anthony Ainley and Gerald Flood were in this season already. For Janet Fielding and Mark Strickson, they were already under contract to appear, really. Whereas with Matthew Waterhouse, they had to get him back and get a new contract done with him. And for Sarah Sutton, they also had to pay like royalty to Johnny Byrne, who created the character for Keeper of Traken, because she wasn't quite made as a companion, was she?
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's nice having them all back though for that ending, and I think it works quite well as a send off because he's a Doctor with, even in a short space of time, has a lot of companions, so they fill it up nicely. I mean, it's a shame they couldn't have predicted that Mark would also be a companion and get George Watkins to somehow record something 40 years early.
Yeah.
But you need to future-proof this stuff. Big Finish has now got to come up with a reason why the Fifth Doctor didn't bother to remember Mark.
Well, I swear there's a Big Finish set in between while the Fifth Doctor's generating circular time.
Yeah. It's winter, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is, it's a cool idea.
But yeah, I suppose Caves of Androzani now. Should we get into the synopsis of this story?
Yeah, we can try and break it down.
To try and tackle this magma beast.
Well, very smooth with these segues here.
Mm.
So Retardis lands on Androzani Minor. There's another one, Androzani Major. Um,
Mm.
a twin planet in the Sirius star system, if you want to be pedantic.
Mm.
Um, as we find a spaceship has arrived carrying a strange cargo, and they just sort of explore these tracks for Doctor and Perry. And we get Nicola Bryan's English accent slip through with saying glass, and you're like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
not a true American there, Perry. Like, how did
Mm.
you fool people from the season 22 Blu-ray interview? Like, yeah, you're not American, Nicola.
I think she improves a lot throughout the Colin Baker era. I think there's much less slips there, but I think Planet of Fire and Caves, where she's adjusting to it, you notice it a bit more, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So we get a bit of explanation about like mud blast and blowholes, all that sort of stuff. So they enter one of these blowholes, and Perry basically slides down because it's like glass, isn't it? How it's sort of been carved, isn't it? It's like quite a slippery surface.
Yeah. It's a bit of an awkward fall in the background of the scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know quite what happened there, but
Uh,
but what does she fall into?
Bat poo.
Mm.
That's basically how they die. How
Uh,
Fifth Doctor dies.
it's the nest, isn't it, of the
Yeah.
one of the bats.
um, because it's so pure that it causes a lovely disease called spectrotoxemia, which
Mm.
feels very authentic, doesn't it? As like a medical disease, doesn't it? You're like, oh yeah, they've got spectrotoxemia.
Uh,
I love that name. It's great. Not the disease,
mm.
but yeah, it sounds quite painful.
It's
Um,
also wonderful that when refined, it's this wonderful restorative, isn't it? It allows people to live twice as long, but in its raw form, now you're dead in about 5 days.
Yeah. So we're sort of greeted by another group of characters, which is Stotts' men, who are gun runners supplying arms for this mysterious figure called Shower's Jack. Um, and they basically do an attack on sort of the main military force within this story, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, is it an attack or?
Well, they do
Oh,
like
they
a little
just sat.
they do like a little gas, like throw some gas canisters, don't they, at them?
Ah, yeah, they do.
Um, Yeah, and then the Doctor and Perry get
I think.
caught up in that, and they get captured by the military force, and they
Oh no, I think the gas attack happens later
okay,
because
they lose the
they're just sort of
guns. Yeah,
yeah,
they
they're just sort of
lose.
sat around. Then they have to go hide, and that's when Fifth Doctor and Perry come along, find all the guns around, and then the military comes along, finds them there, and given that they've just caught these two people surrounded by a bunch of ammo and guns and explosives, they think, oh, we've caught ourselves some gun runners.
So off they get interrogated, thinking that they're working for Shara's Jack, um, and yeah, and then they get sort of interrogated by one of the main characters, which is Morgus.
Who's off on Androzani Major here? He's skyping in, isn't he? Or
Yeah,
Zoom calling in.
Zoom calling you.
Skype's a bit dead now.
It's interesting that he's supposedly the main villain of the piece when you think Sheriff Jack is really, but I guess Sheriff Jack falls under that misunderstood
He's
character.
more of a tragic villain,
Yeah,
really, isn't he?
yeah, he's just sort
And
of a victim of circumstance, really.
yeah, but in this story, it's much more the case that everyone's more of a villain, I suppose. Like everyone's got their own selfish motives, really, which the Doctor and Perry just get caught in the middle of. Like, there's no true heroes in this story. There's no one good side and one bad. It's all war profiteering by this society with this obsession to look younger.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we have this mysterious figure, Shara's Jack, sort of keeping an eye on things what are happening.
He's got like his cameras hidden throughout the military base, hasn't he?
Yeah, so he knows every move they're making, and after that we have the Doctor's and Perry's execution, the Red Cloth,
Mm.
and basically they are sent off to be shot by the firing squad, really. Very much like the
Yeah.
War Games Part 1 cliffhanger, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, that's true actually. Although this time they actually do open fire.
Yes, yeah,
It's quite a dramatic way to end this episode, and I think it keeps that energy up, really, doesn't it? It
yes,
doesn't. It does not let up. This is very much helped by it being a four-parter and wonderful direction from Graham Harper as well. It keeps that momentum building, and it's shot almost more like a film. We've got to mention Graham Harper, director of the story, also his one of his first directing gigs, but he'd come back to direct for the new series as well. Stolen Earth, Journey's End were two of his. I think there's a couple of others in the roster
yeah.
too
Army
as well, isn't
Ghost,
there?
Doomsday.
Ah, yeah, of course. So yeah, very much a veteran of the Doctor Who uh, directing community. And you can see he gets off to a very strong start here. And I think Peter Davison in particular really liked him because he was there on the floor for one thing and also had such a style and energy to his direction.
Yeah, it
So yeah,
wasn't the multicam setup, which was like, okay, point camera one, A there, camera two now, camera three.
mm,
It was more handheld, and you can notice it in the way the shots transition
mm,
from one to another. Really, it's a lot more smoother and feels more. I guess it broke the mold of how TV could be done. Really,
yeah,
than the
it's
multicam
shot.
setup.
Yeah, it's shot. It feels like it's shot by someone with something to prove. It doesn't just feel like someone who just is quietly doing their job, getting their 9 to 5 done before they have to leave. This is very much someone with a vision for how this story should be.
Yeah,
But yeah, so part two, we open up and reveal that it wasn't actually the Fifth Doctor and Perry who were shot. It was instead androids. The Fifth Doctor and Perry were spirited away to Sharajek's headquarters, where they meet Sharajek himself, of course, who has this obsession with beauty, doesn't he? So that's sort of why he decided to save
very Phantom
Perry.
of the Opera, isn't it? Much like Magnus
Mm,
Greel again.
yeah, the mask and the deformed figure beneath. And he's got a lust for revenge against Morgus as well, who we have of course met before. Morgus is meanwhile having meetings with the president of Androzani Major. It's this wonderful world that Robert Holmes has built up here, isn't it? With the Presidium and such, and this business sort of having a strong hold over all these proceedings.
You get the classic
Yeah.
sort of double acts in every section of the story, really.
Hmm. But yeah, there's some tension between Morgus and the president there. Like he's very much calling him out for things, but not quite openly saying it, just leaving it implied. And so, meanwhile, in Sharashrek's hideout, we also meet Salatin, the real Salatin, because the previous version that we saw, who was the second in command to, I cannot remember the character's name, who is the general right now. Uh, Chelak, that's it, General Chelak. Uh, was actually an android spy planted there by Sharashtrek pretty early on during the war, and he's kept Salatin around with him in the meantime. But he reveals to the Doctor and Perry after they describe some of their symptoms that they have caught spectrotoxemia. And he is very entertained by this because he was expecting Sharashek to kill him off now that he's got some new company with him. But instead, this company is going to die pretty soon unless they can find some bat's milk. But they are trapped at the moment with these androids on guard. There's no way they can escape. Fortunately, the Doctor works out that these androids are only programmed to shoot humans on sight, and his biology is different enough that he is able to slip past them. And so the Fifth Doctor, Salatin, and Perry are able to escape. But there's a bit of a shootout, a bit of confusion, and Salatin grabs Perry and makes a run for the army base while the Fifth Doctor is left unconscious for a little while. Meanwhile, Sharashjek is trying to meet up with Stotts so that they can make this deal and exchange the guns. But Sharashjek has lost all, not Sharashjek, sorry, Stotts has lost all the ammo due to that military raid we spoke about earlier. But he's not very happy because Sharashjek was meant to be there about 3 days earlier. He left him waiting, which, I mean, you're sort of meant to believe these caves are a lot bigger than how they end up feeling in the story, really, because characters come and go quite often.
Mm.
But obviously, with this war going on, there is a reason he couldn't get there quite in time. So Stotts isn't very happy. He still wants the full payment because he sees it as Jack's fault for not turning up.
Yeah, he wants
Jack,
5, but Jax is
yeah,
offering 2, isn't he?
yeah, Jack offers 2 kilos instead. So I mean, let's explain the situation of this war quickly, actually, as well, because I can't quite remember when the story got around to that. But basically, it's a Spectrox mine, isn't it? And Spectrox, as we said,
Yeah,
is this
Jax has a
valuable.
monopoly on it.
Yeah, he seized the refinery, and then he spirited all the stock away, and so he's in command of it, really, and it's being rationed out on Androzani Major, which has racked up the price of it a fair bit. So Morgus, as this businessman, is profiting quite well of this war, even though he is putting funds into supposedly stopping it by helping out the military. But yes, so Sharashjek goes off to collect the 2 kilos. Stotts, getting a bit greedy, decides that he will follow him to see where the refined Spectrox is stored. But Jack knows that Stotts is going to do this, so leads him into a trap. A trap leads him into the path of the magma beast, where I think he loses one of his men, doesn't he, Stotts?
Yeah.
During that attack. And while this is happening, someone is lurking in the shadows. Well, it's meant to be the shadows, but we can clearly see the Fifth Doctor standing up there when Jack says, "Whoever you are, come out of the shadows."
Yeah,
And he just steps forward, and he's like in the same lighting as he was before. But yeah, so that is when they are reunited with the Fifth Doctor. Jack takes him back to his base. He also pays Stotts while they're there.
That's part 3, isn't it?
Oh, have I gone too far ahead of it?
Yeah, because part 2 ends with the magma beast. Yeah, you've gone into
part 2. Yeah, part 2 ends with the magma beast attack, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm sort of encroaching on your territory a bit.
No, that's fine. Yeah, you carry on if you want.
Yeah, I'm finishing off your work a bit there, aren't I?
Yeah, so I can breeze through it a bit quicker, but yeah.
Yeah, but I suppose also in part 2, Salatin makes his way back to the army base and gets there, doesn't he? And speaks to Shellac and reveals that he's had an android alongside him this whole time, but formulates a plan instead and says that they can use this against Sharashjek now that they know they've got the robot duplicate there. They can feed it false information and send Jek's androids on a wild goose chase while Salatin leads the real force into Jek's actual base. Yeah, I mean, take it away with the rest of part 3 now, what I didn't already eat into there.
I mean, that's part 3 as well, that little bit as well.
Oh dear, I'm very sorry.
It's fine. I mean, the only other bit you're really missing from that is Morgus kills the president.
I swear that's part 3.
Yeah, it's part 3. He kills Morgus.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said I was missing it from my part 2.
No. This is the only bit we're missing from part 3 is that. And what else we got in part 3?
I suppose, would you like me to finish off part 3 then? And you could go for part 4.
No, you're fine, really. I can finish this off quickly. So Stott takes the Doctor away because, Jax has no need for the Doctor. As, Sharashjek is all after his beauty. He goes and rescues Perry. Well, I say rescue, kidnaps Perry.
Yeah.
And takes her back and, does whatever he needs to do. And, of course, the Fifth Doctor's back on the ship and they're off to, Stotts thinks he can get some good answers, get a good payment out of the doctor. When Morgus turns around and says, "No, we're not. You're not going back. Stay in stationary orbit." So Stotts
Yeah.
goes off to have a bit of a lie down because it's been a long old campaign for those men. Whereas the Fifth Doctor thinks, "Hang on, I need to save my friend." So he escapes and sends the ship into descent. And nothing's going to stop him now. He's going to save his best friend. Well, save one of his friends, his newly met friend.
Yeah. I suppose while that's also all gone on, because Morgus saw the Fifth Doctor, he assumes that he is a government spy, doesn't he? Sent by
Yes.
perhaps the president, because he saw his execution, which Shellac didn't reveal to anyone about the androids because he didn't want to be a laughing stock. So they kept that secret, him and Android Celatin, as it turns out. Uh, yeah, it's quite a brutal scene where the president is just pushed down the hole.
Yeah, just spinning. Yeah.
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 Uh, yeah, so part 4 now.
All guns blazing.
Yeah, this is where the action really ramps up. The Doctor makes it down and is on the run, being chased by Stotts' men. Open fire on, very much struggling. And this is where the magma blast starts to build up, doesn't it? The army's caught out by it, and it all just
Well, you have them
turns to
actually reach the
chaos,
base,
really.
don't you? You have Chalak actually getting into the base and confronting
Yeah,
Jack.
as the magma blast started to go off, I think he rips his mask off, doesn't he? And
Yeah,
he's caught off guard
horrified.
by this sight, and so Jack takes the opportunity to push him out into the mud flow, and that is the end of Chelak. Also, during this, the real Salatin ends up getting shot because they're wearing those
Belt.
little belts that the androids register the frequency of. But unfortunately, Salatin has guessed wrong with that because Jack knew that all this was coming and so changed the frequency of the belts, leading to Salatin's death there at the hands of the android. But back to Jack's bunker, he's left without his mask. He's in a bit of an upset state. Goes over to Perry, who's not doing too well either, and she's not quite ready to look on Jack's true face, sadly. And so Jack sort of goes and cowers under a table for a bit. It's a beautiful physical performance from, is it Peter Gabriel?
I want to say is it Christopher?
Christopher. Oh, but Peter Gabriel's totally different. Christopher Gable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was way off there.
well,
they did try to get David Bowie for it, so
yeah,
there's similar lines there of sorts.
Yeah, I guess.
But yeah, wonderful physical performance and vocal performance as well. Because you never quite see much you never see his real face. You just see the prosthetics for the scarred face for a brief little stint. So yeah.
So while that happens, you have Stotts and Morgus teaming up because Morgus has been basically
found out, hasn't he?
Found out he's a bit of a crook, and he's lost every asset and every bit of power he has. So now
he's been betrayed by his assistant in the end.
Yeah.
And so now he's on the same level as Stotts, really. They're both criminals on the run. But Stotts is pretty sure he knows where the Spectrox is stored. And so they're going to go and get what they can and run off with that and make a bit of money from it. During the scene is also what we talked about earlier, where Stotts shoots down his crewmates because they're out. They don't want to risk their lives anymore. This has been way more than they bargained for. They're happy with their 2 kilos each. But Stotts isn't going to let them even have that because he is a nasty piece of work, that character. There is that wonderful scene in part 1, I believe, where he almost makes, puts the pill in one of their mouths and like holds the knife up to them. It's beautifully shot. I love how it starts with it's a between the legs shot, but it's a much better one than the infamous 10th planet between the legs shot with the
Yes.
cyber crotch.
Yeah.
Instead, this starts off with Stotts taking a little nap, and one of his men comes up to him, and we sort of have that between the legs shot from the man who's working for him. But it ends the other way round. It's flipped because Stotts is the one who truly has the power in that dynamic. And so that's a wonderful bit of visual storytelling there. But yeah, back to part 4. We're doing our usual, aren't we? We're going
Do a
off
little
on tangents.
tangent.
We're forgetting little things here
Yeah,
and there.
remembering
But
it.
hopefully you, dear listener, are putting up with our incompetencies and enjoying this synopsis.
So, Fifth Doctor returns to Jack's lair, and goes on about getting the bat's milk. So off he goes to get the bat's milk. Whereas we have Jex and Morgus and Scott have a final showdown. Will Jex get his revenge against Morgus? He definitely does. But Jex is shot, and then Scott is shot by Shallak's android.
Celatin.
Celatin's
Yeah,
android.
he returns at the last moment, and then Jack dies in Celatin's arms after everyone else has died around him, really. Like there's a little fire breaking out where Morgus has been killed, and the Fifth Doctor returns with the bat's milk. It's like he's not got time to wonder what the fuck's gone on here. He's a bit too busy trying to save Perry's life, so he just runs in while shit's hitting the fan, grabs Perry, and gets out of there. Why he didn't give her the bat's milk then?
We'll never know.
He just wanted to be a bit more dramatic, really. We'll allow him that. It's his final story. Because they make it back to the TARDIS as the mud flow is, the mud bursts are building and exploding all over the place. And there's only enough bat's milk for just Perry. So the Fifth Doctor collapses, remembers some of his past companions before finally regenerating into the Sixth Doctor. Colin Baker has made his debut, and it's changed, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon. And then at the end there, we get Colin Baker's face in the titles, or the end credits, rather. And Colin Baker is credited first as the Doctor, rather than Peter, which is the only time that's happened in a Regeneration story.
Yeah, in a way, it's a bit disrespectful. In a way, I get why it's doing it, because it's like "Long live the king."
Yeah, it's like introducing your new Doctor, isn't it? But yeah, I don't. It does seem a bit weird that they use the same title sequence, though, just with Colin Baker's head oddly superimposed over it. Like when you're doing the Twin Dilemma the next week, surely you could just use the.
Got that ready, yeah.
Yeah. You've already got that made. Surely you could just use that end credits instead. Have a little tease for what's to come.
So with that all out of the way, we've done our little tangent of good. Oh, wasn't that bit good? Wasn't that bit good? I guess we've already said a bit of a review of it. What do you think of Caves?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that we are very positive about this story. I mean, I know you've got one small criticism of it.
Yeah, I do. Do you want me to say?
Yeah, go for it.
It's Morgus's lovely bits to camera, his fourth wall bits, where I think it breaks every bit of atmosphere and tension the story's going for, because it sort of feels very comedic, very sort of mockumentary, going, I'm going to spin around at the camera now and go, oh no, this wasn't what I foretold, and then goes back to the scene as normal. It feels like you're breaking everything in the story, because the story is very much a tense, gritty story, and having that sort of, it's not played for laughs, is it? It's a very serious, those are very serious bits, isn't it, really?
I suppose it's just the way you always see those bits in comedies makes that part of your dramatic reading of it.
Yeah, and it's making the camera a character in the show when the camera shouldn't be a character within this story, in simple terms.
Yeah, so it's harder to take it seriously. I don't really mind it as much, to be honest.
I didn't mind it until it got to like part 3. when it would just be
Uh,
back and forth, or he'd just spin round on his office chair. And I was like, this is just not gelling as well as it should be done, really.
hmm. It certainly is a bit of an odd choice, though. And certainly, if it was done like, he looks down and like puts a pondering face on and is just muttering it away to himself, I wouldn't then be watching it thinking, oh, you know what this needs? This needs like a turn to the camera to make it work better. But at the same time, I'm not really as bothered by it as you are.
Would say I'm bothered. It's just trying to find a criticism in this story.
Yeah, so it is very hard to find that many. I mean, we said about the awkward ADR at the start there, but even then, it's like it's not that bad. And once you're past it, you just forget about it and move on, really.
The armadillo, sorry, the magma beast.
But
Like
it's yeah,
it's shot in the dark. I feel like if it was like Warriors of a Deep situation where it's sort of brightly lit studio, yeah, it'll probably look a bit comical, but because it's in the blowholes, it's
mm,
fine.
yeah. I mean, it doesn't look that great. It's the same as the rat in Talons of Wing Chang, really, isn't it? It's not
Yeah,
great, but it's hardly there, and when it is, it's mostly hidden away. I mean, certainly part two's cliffhanger with that is a bit less memorable compared to the others. Like, they are very hard hitting cliffhangers.
some of the
And
best in Doctor Who.
as evidenced by the fact that I completely forgot that was the cliffhanger and just went on into the part three synopsis, shows how much stronger those other two are than that one is. But ultimately they can't all be winners. You've got to end your episode at some point, so it's as good a place as any to stop it, really.
Yeah,
I
Davison, he's really given his all. You can tell that he's putting everything into this one.
hmm,
From him being a massive cock block in part two, is great. Just how he just blocks Sarah's check. It's great.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
great.
physically gets in the way, doesn't he?
Yeah, I really like that.
Uh, I think he then goes that quite nice two shot of him, don't you, where he's like, and a mind that can rival my own.
Yeah,
Yes.
like you cheeky git. I'm more clever than you, pal.
Uh, but I mean, a beautiful tragic villain there in Shara's Jack. Very well played, very well written. You could feel sorry for him. Yeah.
Yeah, very Shakespearean, I think.
Hmm.
But he's very well realized with like in part three, you get the backstory of how he came to be like that with like the mud blast, how Morgus portrayed. So you get the reason why he has that sort of vendetta against Morgus. And I think there is something quite creepy about the fake eye.
Hmm.
I find
Yeah,
it
you
quite
don't notice
sinister.
it that often, do you?
But when it
It's
gets to certain close-up shots, you're like, that's not a real eye. That's quite sinister. Don't know why,
hmm.
but it just kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah. I'd say the only other similar story would perhaps be Enemy of the World. So, like in the Salamander and Kent dynamic, you get that same sort of betrayal that you have with Morgus and
Yes,
Shara's Check. Sort of the more hard hitting realism of it, I suppose.
but
And
yeah.
certainly, what's the guard's name? The one who also plays Kramer in Android Invasion. Who was
Oh,
in?
is it I know the actor's name,
Yeah,
Milton Jones. But I can't remember
yeah.
the character's name.
But yeah, him in Enemy of the World certainly
Yeah.
wouldn't feel out of place as a character in this story case of Androzani. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's a brilliant story start to finish, isn't it? Such a strong, tight script from Robert Holmes. Goes along at such a pace, matched with the perfect director, really giving it so much energy and some unique direction for Doctor Who at this time. It all just comes together wonderfully with some great performances. Nothing really sticks out as too bad. No scenes really drag on too long or too short, overstay their welcome. It's got a lot of moving parts because ultimately the Doctor's not there to save anyone other than Perry. He's not there to help this planet as such. He just wants them to make out alive, really. And I think it's interesting that in spite of that, the Doctor's arrival there is very much what it's the first domino in it all collapsing, really, isn't it? With him throwing off Morgus, making him believe he's a government spy. Because ultimately, the problem with these people is that they can't believe that two innocents have just got caught up in this. They believe that there's got to be some wider motivation from that, and picking away at that is a lot of the character's flaws in the end. It leads to their own comeuppance.
I think it works well because you've got these smaller circles and you just see it rippling out how it affects the Androzani Major, how it
Yeah.
all sort of ripples back to that, really. I like it.
Yeah, and again, a very well-built world there by Robert Holmes. Even though you hardly really see any of it. All you see of Androzani Major is just the office,
Yeah.
Morgus's office. And yet you really get a picture of this whole society through that, through those wonderful bits of dialogue that never feel expositional. It always feels natural, but it just paints such a wonderful picture of this almost dystopian world, really. So, yeah, what would you rate Caves of Androzani?
Oh, this is the tough one.
Oh,
Um,
is it going to crack a 10 for you?
I feel like I've got to give it a 10 because it's pretty much a perfect story, isn't it?
You feel like you're just trying to find flaws in it when there aren't really that many.
And
There's like some, but they don't matter enough.
I think it's one of those stories where you don't watch it that often because I haven't watched this since the B&M set was announced back in 2019. So it's always a nice, refreshing one to watch after so long because you're just like, yeah, it's a cracker, isn't it?
You forget how good it really is, don't you? You're always
Yeah.
You feel like, nah, it's overrated by fan consensus. But then you actually watch it and you realise it has earned its place.
Like the music's great. It's got moments that as a kid just make you want to recreate like Davison just being shot at. It's like every time you go to the beach, you're like, I'm on Caves of Androzani being shot by Stockton's men. That's just how my weird brain works.
And I think also it shows that the scariest enemies the Doctor can face are often the human ones. Like there's that level of disconnect when it comes to the Daleks or the Cybermen. But when you have these humans doing all these despicable things, it makes it that much more scary and that much more daunting of how are the Fifth Doctor and Perry going to get out of this. Like when they're locked in the cell just by human guards and such, waiting for a firing squad, it feels so much more tense than when the Doctor is, for example, locked up in a cell, in a Dalek cell or something. And I suppose maybe it's because it's more easy to imagine for us. It's a bit more tangible. It just makes it that much more scary because it's that much closer to the real world. And certainly in some comparisons with the big business side of things with Morgus having that hold over the politics and the government, it's depressingly similar to our world in many ways.
And that's the power of good writing, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I said it, but I'm going 10 out of 10 too for this one.
We're on the same page today.
Yeah, we are. So,
is this the highest rated one of the calendar so far?
Yeah, I think we've gone 9 before, but I don't think we've got 10.
I think I've used 10s on Spearhead. I think.
Did you? Yeah, you may have done.
I've definitely used my 10s there for sure.
Yeah, this is certainly my first 10 though, and a well-deserving one.
Yeah, you've been quite tight.
Will Twin Dilemma get a 10 though?
I mean, you've never seen it, so this is fun.
You never know. Yeah, this is going to be my first watch of it, so we will see how that goes. You, dear listener, or viewer, sorry, we'll find out tomorrow. If you want to skip out on it though, join us the next day for Last Adventure instead. We'll understand. I
mean, to be fair, it's probably going to be the highlight of the calendar for many people because they want to see us suffer. We're doing this for your entertainment, so like and subscribe, do all that lovely stuff because we like it. It's cool.
Yeah, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
Change, my dear, and it seems it's time to suffer. Goodbye.
Oh dear.